Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm going to talk about the episode The Whirlwind from season 9. This is episode 9, and it was written by Claire Whitaker and directed by Nell Cox. Early in the episode, we see Jim Bob hitchhiking, and he is picked up by Jonesy. Now, when we are seeing inside the car, the two of them talking, this was what I refer to as a process shot. And then shortly after that, we start seeing that there is a problem with the brakes, and we get a point of view then of the car going down the road from inside the car, but we don't see who's driving. So that was likely a stunt driver at that point. Then we see Mary Ellen and Jason kind of go by as the car races. How they saw Jim Bob was in the car when it was moving that fast, I don't know. But I found myself going, oh, I really did drive that Woody station wagon at times. So we turn around. So that was actually me driving, and it really was Richard Gilliland driving when some of those shots were going on. But when we were inside, we were back to process shots when you could see us talking in that dialogue. So in terms of the then when we're chasing each other down the hill, you can't see that it's us driving. So I have a feeling that those were then transportation people doing the driving, because obviously they're not going to have any of us involved in some sort of an actual race or dangerous situation. Then we see that the car has flipped over. So somehow they did that, but obviously we didn't see the crash because we didn't need to see the crash. So that was good. And then we go running over and we end up getting Jonesy and bringing him home. So I did notice that when I'm sitting and patching up his cut and stuff like that, that there's a point where he's talking about what he's planning to do, just hit the open road. And I start to say, you can't do that forever. And there's a little slight flub in that line if you listen.
Coast to coast, sleeping in the sunshine, eating all I want, meeting beautiful women.
You can't do that forever. You can't do that forever.
But I started to say one word and then switched. It's very minor, but I caught it. So maybe you will too. But I guess they figured it wasn't worth doing another take for. Here, where I am checking Jonesy's heart rate and stuff, pulse, the watch that I'm looking at, I seem to remember that was my own personal watch that I just wore all the time. So they were fine with me wearing it as the character. And then when after Jonesy kisses me, when John Curtis comes in, I love so many cute things with the twins in this episode. And he just looks like he's about to cry. And I remember when I talked with the twins a couple of years ago, they were talking about personality-wise that I think it was Marshall was a little more outgoing, his mom said, as a baby, where Michael was a little more timid. And so chances are with some of the scenes where he was a little like, the bottom lip was quivering, likely it was Michael. In this episode is when Jason decides to buy the Dewdrop Inn. And of course, Corbeth is not happy. She thinks if he turned it into a concert hall or a theater, it would be great. And he's just going, I can't do that. It makes no sense. I just want to be able to keep playing music and be able to make a living. So that doesn't go over big with Ronnie Claire with Corbeth. As Cindy and I believe Elizabeth are making up the cot for Jonesy in the mill, he asks about Mary Ellen and her husband, and Cindy's the one who tells him that, no, I've been a widow. And she says for 4 years.
Mary Ellen's been a widow for 4 years.
Kurt was killed at Pearl Harbor.
Which would make John Curtis nearly 5, and there's no way he looks that old to me. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but it doesn't look, he looks like maybe 3.5 there. So I think they were pushing it a bit on that age. A little later, then after that, you see us standing on the front porch, me and Jonesy, and we were dealing a lot with height difference here. I not quite 5'5". Richard is like 6 foot. So they do things in those types of scenes where you see he ends up leaning down onto the porch railing as we're talking, so that you don't have that huge height differential that means that the camera either has to be further back or you're shooting really up at someone and really down at someone. So they find ways to have me stand on a little apple, what they call an apple box, a wooden crate, to bring our height a little closer together. But in this case, they had Richard lean down. A little discrepancy here where Mary Ellen says that Kurt didn't have to sign up, but he did because he thought it was his duty.
He didn't have to join the army when he did. He just believed it was the right thing to do.
But many of you will remember when Kurt did join, it was actually that he was called up, that he had an agreement because they had helped pay for his medical training. And so he was obligated to serve at the time, which is why Mary Ellen wasn't happy. I think if he'd actually joined up with a new baby, she would have been even more unhappy. Technical things about dealing with props in this scene. As I come into the kitchen, I'm carrying books and then I drop them. So with things like that, you're always trying to make it look like it's real. And hopefully it looked real to you, but that was me trying to make it look like it was real. So let me know if I succeeded. The picnic scene with Jonesy, Mary Ellen, and John Curtis was filmed on the back lot, not too far from where the outside of the house is. They just created a lovely little patch of grass and flowers there for us to have this picnic. And I love how Jonesy always calls John Curtis Johnny.
Okay, Johnny. Here you go.
Which I think is kind of sweet. Now, they do say here that Jonesy talks about having majored in geology. And of course, in the subsequent reunion movies, he was then a veterinarian. So I think that was another case of something we were just supposed to ignore, that he talked about geology, because how you go from geology to being a vet in just, a short period of time, I have no idea. As Mary Ellen is falling for Jonesy, all of a sudden we find out his car has been fixed and he's talking about hitting the open road. And of course, Mary Ellen hears that and disappears up into her room. Jonesy tries to get her to open the door. And then as you see him go into the house to go chase Mary Ellen, there's a ladder up there. Well, isn't that handy? Well, they needed that ladder for him to be able to climb up there and knock on her bedroom window. But in the kitchen scene earlier, Rose says that he has promised to fix the roof. So that justifies that ladder being there, which enables him to then climb the ladder and knock on her window. Now, this was a case of editing again, because you see me inside the window and he comes up to the outside of the window and he's kind of crouched there. Well, on the exterior set, you see him climb up and crouch down at the window. So when we went into the sound stage to shoot from inside the bedroom where I was, and there he is. So he's crouching on the soundstage floor just outside that window. But there is a point where they go into a close-up of him where he's kind of leaning there. Well, there was no sill there because they couldn't get the camera in a position to do that. So he's just kind of pretending to be leaning on something, and they have the camera framed so you can't see that he's actually leaning on nothing. Of course, Mary Ellen says yes to Jonesy's proposal, and the next thing we see is Betty Howell arriving on the bus, and we know this is going to be trouble. As Mary Ellen talks with Aaron about her only regret about going on the road with Jonesy is that she's sort of setting aside her pursuit of becoming a doctor and her nursing work for now, but she figures she can come back to it later. And Aaron, reminds her that our parents always said, just finish what you started. But she picks up a picture of Kurt. And in this picture, we see it is Scott Hylands who took over the role of Kurt for these couple of episodes. So this is not a picture of Tom Bauer. So we're being shown that indeed it's going to be a different actor playing Kurt. The family decides to celebrate Jonesy and Mary Ellen's engagement by doing a sneak peek at the Dewdrop Inn, thinking they'll go and help Jason at the end. But they arrive to find out that it's nowhere, and Jason is drunk and there's tons of work to be done, but the family kind of pulls together and says they will get him through it. Cindy and Mary Ellen are about to go to the Dewdrop when Betty arrives to drop the bomb that Kurt is potentially still alive, which of course Mary Ellen doesn't want to believe. And she does ask Jonesy to wait, and he says he can't wait right now, that something's pulling him. He needs to keep moving, to keep proving that he's to himself that he's alive. As Jonesy waits for Mary Ellen to go to the Dewdrop, he's interacting with John Curtis. And again, just John Curtis, so cute in this episode. And then when I once again drop something, I have the dropsies in this episode. I drop my purse and the picture falls out of Kurt. And that's where John Curtis picks it up and says, Daddy, as if he remembers Daddy from being an infant, basically. But hey, probably because I've shown him pictures of him all the time. So that's why he would recognize him. But they would have coached him to say that. They would have just had him on camera and just go and said, say Daddy. And until he said Daddy, and they were able to get that on screen. At the opening of the Dewdrop, all of a sudden a fuse is blown, and in the meantime they light candles, and Jason gets Aunt Rose to play the player piano, and that's when Ike and Corbeth enter to this like dimly lit setting, and that she realizes is rather charming. And then a waitress comes to seat them. And this waitress was one of our longtime stand-ins, Debbie Richmond, who stood in for Michael Learned. And she actually got a couple of lines here. So that was nice to see. Jonesy and Mary Ellen have what seems like it'll be a last dance together before he's going to hit the road. And the next day we do see him getting into his car to head out. And I'm saying, that I can't leave right now. I need to find out what's going on for my sake and for John Curtis's sake. And side note, this was one of my favorite dresses. I really liked the style of this little pink dress with the little, sort of almost 50s kind of flair to the skirt. Our guest actors in this episode, of course, Richard Gilliland as Jonesy. He was born January 23rd, 1950 in Fort Worth, Texas, and he sadly died March 18th, 2021. He was married to actress Jean Smart, who he met while working on Designing Women, where he actually played actress Annie Potts' husband or boyfriend or something like that. I think, boyfriend in the series. Together, he and Jean had 2 children. He was in the movie Airplane 2, the sequel. In TV, he did a ton of TV. McMillan and Wife, 6 episodes, 14 episodes of Designing Women, Party of 5, Touched by an Angel, Matlock, Murder, She Wrote, 30-something he did 7 episodes of. He did 10 episodes of Heartland and 6 episodes of Love Boat. Fantasy Island, he did 23 episodes of Operation Petticoat. And on the Waltons, he did 2 episodes. He did here The Whirlwind, and he did The Tempest, and then he was in the reunion movies A Wedding on Walton's Mountain, Mother's Day on Walton's Mountain, where Jonesy and Mary Ellen got married, and then A Day for Thanks on Walton's Mountain. Pamela McMyler played Betty Howell. She was born November 9th, 1943, on an army base near Somerville, South Carolina. When she was 10, her father was transferred to France. She went to school there and became fluent in French. She worked for Steven Spielberg in an early short film of his, Amblin. She did lots of TV, from like Man to Uncle, The Addams Family, Ben Casey, Gidget, Adam 12, Ironside, The Virginian, Gunsmoke, Three's Company, Knots Landing. And she was in the movie For Pete's Sake with Barbara Streisand and Chisholm with John Wayne. And then, of course, we had the adorable Michael and Marshall Reed back as John Curtis. And then, as I mentioned, Debbie Richmond was the waitress. Thank you for joining me for this segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. If you enjoyed this, please do hit like and subscribe. Next up, I'm going to talk about the very controversial episode, The Tempest. And I rewatched it for the first time in forever. And I found some interesting things about it. So maybe you might enjoy joining me as I talk about that episode, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I'll see you next time for more Behind the Scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.